Welcome back. It's a brand new year, 2024, and you are on Off the Couch with Dr. Greg, and we are here with etiquette expert Zoe. Hello, Zoe.
Hello, Dr. Greg. Hi, everyone.
Hey, and also producer Brian. Hey, Brian, welcome back.
Hey, happy Monday, you guys.
This is where psychology meets everyday life. It's also where my computer runs out of batteries as we talk. But let's talk about... we're going to talk about some stories today on Off the Couch. We're going to talk about the wrong reason people keep secrets, the hardest part of waiting, and the surprising lesson that straight couples can learn from gay couples. And then when we talk about psychology in the news, we're going to talk about why so many pedestrians are being killed. This was a feature in the New York Times that I could not help but talk about because it really brings up some issues within psychology that you might not expect. And then etiquette expert Zoe is going to give us some helpful hints to what to do on the road, whether you are walking or driving. All right. So first, Happy New Year, you guys. Happy New Year. Did you guys make New Year's resolutions?
No.
I did.
Yeah. What did you do, Brian?
So for me, I told myself that at least this month, starting this month, I wouldn't be ordering in. So, because I'm really bad at ordering in food or like ice cream. And like right before I'm going to bed, I'm like, I don't want to leave, but I want to order in. So it's been really pricey, really pricey that I'm like, okay, we just have to stop completely for like a month. And then I also want to just not hold back whenever I feel like I want to say something in certain situations. You know, it's going to come off rude and I'm very well aware of that, but I don't want to hold back whenever I feel like I should have said something and then I'm like drowning in it for like days. So, yeah.
Because you know what'll happen.
I'm going to blow up. Yeah.
Why didn't I say so-and-so when he said so-and-so? And sometimes it lasts for years.
Yep. And so I don't want to do that anymore where I'm like, I know I need to be careful and like not go too crazy with it. But I'm also just not standing down anymore. Yeah.
Two things. I follow a different rule. I follow a rule: when in doubt, leave it out. Like, do not say something. If you have any question about maybe I should say this, maybe I shouldn't say that, that means keep it shut, keep the trap shut. But number two, let's talk about anger for a second, because you're saying it as if you're going to do it when you're angry at somebody. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, because it's usually in like situations that I'm upset when people's behavior or like just the way other people behave in public or anything like that, public spaces. For example, recently, two guys were taking up like the whole locker bench and then left their towels all over the bench and on the floor. So I kicked the towels at them when they left, and I was like, what the, like that's rude. Like, especially in our gym, that's not kind of like the culture there to begin with. So it's like, no, usually I would have been like, what I wanted to say or done something and just drowned it in like that poison of not doing or saying anything. But I'm like, no, we're going to start reacting, which I know can be a little dangerous. And like, yeah.
No, sometimes it's necessary to speak up, and it's okay to speak up. And so what I was saying was, you can say to somebody, well, what exactly did you mean by that? Would you mind explaining to me what you meant just now? That. And so be like, hey guys, do you want to take your towels with you? Like, that's not angry.
I would say that would be a good approach, as opposed to, hey, you idiots, you left these towels behind. I think that we need to follow the principles of assertiveness there. And the principles of assertiveness are to say why you want something, say what you want, and to show respect for the other person. So if we're to say why you want the towels, like, hey, you guys, maybe like we all want to show respect, especially for the people that work here. Do you mind picking up your towels? And I guess that would be showing respect. What?
That's not our culture here.
It is not our culture, but you know what? Sometimes we don't have those moments, because I saw a guy clipping his toenails on the floor of the gym and just leaving them there. I had a little nauseous response. I could not think of anything constructive to say. But I made a mental note.
And that's
How about
what my
that?
whole thing is. It's like, I don't need to teach you to be respectful. Like, the common sense that you can't put the towel in the bin where it goes right below where you grab the towel to begin with
Okay.
is crazy.
So let's talk about anger. It's usually anger is constructed when somebody has a belief that somebody else is doing something wrong, that they're a totally bad person for having done it, and they need to be punished or taught a lesson. Is this what you went through, Brian?
This is correct.
Okay.
Very
And
much so.
actually what we want to do, that kind of thing can lead to a very destructive outcome. We'll talk about anger another day, but the key there, I think we already talked about. If you can say it assertively, you're going to be a little bit better than if you're aggressive. I think what you're trying to avoid is being passive.
Exactly.
And that, I can understand that, but you need to be
work
careful.
on,
Yeah.
the delivery, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, because you could have a very negative consequence. Let's talk about New Year's resolutions. Let's talk about something which is the bad news about them. 80% of New Year's resolutions fail in the first few weeks. I bet that's why you didn't make one, Zoe. I didn't make it. I kind of made one.
Well, I'm sorry to go against the first rule of improv, which is to always say yes, but I didn't want to lie.
Well, we're not improving, so it's fine. You just didn't care to make one. That's fine. But I kind of did. I over the break, I thought, you know what? I'm going to plan. I planned some weeks off. That I didn't have a trip or anything associated because I just need to have some time off to keep my brain fresh. So I did that. Like the bottom thing was I wanted to take the week off between Christmas and New Year, which I don't know that I've ever taken off in my entire working life since I was 14 years old. So this might be the year that I take off between Christmas and New Year. Ta-da!
Nice.
So that's kind of cool. So let's talk about this. Most people set very vague resolutions like exercising more, eating healthier, and losing weight. Those are not very helpful goals. So there was a survey done of 1,066 people, and it was recruited from social media sites. And it showed that actually goals that are set in a specific way, and we've talked about this when we talked about doing homework before, the goals set in a specific way can be very constructive and lead you to a good end. Number one, they illustrated in the research that approach-oriented goals are better than avoidance-oriented goals. So doing something rather than not doing something is the goal. And if you want to not do something, like let's say you want to not gain weight, then you want to do, what's the approach rule there? Well, it would be maybe to eat healthier, to eat between certain times during the day, exercise more. There are strategies that you might want to put into place that might assist you in the loss of weight. So they talked about SMART goals, and SMART goals work. I don't like acronyms. This is a fun thing about me. I just don't like acronyms. But SMART stands for S is in specific, not vague, but clear. It's measurable. The M is for measurable, clear indication of progress. A is for attainable. It's got to be realistic. R is for relevant. It's something you really want, not what others want for you. And it's timely, has a clear end point. So SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So if you're going to set a goal, so Brian, what you would want to do is to get some support to help you with your accountability. So some support might be instrumental support, doing something for you so you could hire a thug to go beat up the guys. I guess that could be one thing. Informational support, giving you advice. Of course, the advice that I gave today may be counterproductive because I was telling you how to avoid perhaps being a dick at the gym, but that's just me. And then appraisal support, evaluation, and constructive feedback. I think I erred on the judgmental side there, so it wasn't very constructive. And emotional support, providing love and empathy, which we are doing for you. We will definitely visit you in the hospital.
Or in jail.
Okay, so let's talk about secrets. This kind of interested me because this paralleled some research we talked about before. And we talked about this with you, Zoe, and we were talking about how to turn down holiday invitations. And that one thing in this research is that when you're honest about turning down and giving the reason, people don't judge you as harshly. Well, I found another reason. I found some other research done by University of Texas, disclosure, one of my alma maters. I got so many. But University of Texas, this is the McCombs School of Business. I did not go there. But the bottom line was, they looked at in the workplace, they were trying to figure out what causes people to keep secrets in the workplace, because this can be really destructive. Like, who used all the creamer? Who took my lunch? All those work secrets that we all try to keep, But anyway, they ascertain that there's a basic reason people keep secrets. Do we remember this from the last podcast? Because I don't know that it was any different. What is the basic reason people keep secrets?
Oh, not to hurt the other person, right?
Well, that's my reason. I don't like hurting people, but no, it's usually more about themselves. What would be? Well, they think that the other person will judge them harshly. So, yeah, that's the bottom line. Is they were measuring, the basic reason that others will judge them harshly. So they teamed up with Oklahoma State University and the University of Chicago to conduct 12 experiments. This was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. Now, I think I've talked about this a little bit before, but that's one of the top journals in psychology. So when you see an article appear in that journal, you take it a little more seriously, like it was done well. It's been peer reviewed by experts, and it's competing for very limited space. So it has to be kind of compelling research. So I always pay attention to these studies just a little bit more. This is what they found, that people were driven to reveal or conceal based on how they thought others would evaluate them. That is pretty much what I just said, isn't it? So you're going to hide something because other people will evaluate you. And this is held true even in the closest relationships. So they measured this with not just work people, they measured this with relationships, with good friends, with people who had these other kinds of relationships with each other, and they would give them these tasks. And they found that people would keep secrets even to their partner because they were afraid of the evaluation. But the expected judgment that they were going to get, so they were keeping a secret, expecting the other person to judge them harshly, that was consistently worse than the actual judgment they got from the other person. And that's really comforting to know. This is very similar to the research. You guys remember this from the previous podcast? I hate to present a study that's so similar, but I just thought it was cool. When we're thinking of conveying negative information about ourselves, we're focused on the content of the message. We think about what we're saying. The listener thinks about that we are saying it and that we are showing bravery. We are showing positive traits, trust, honesty, vulnerability. They're looking at us as a person and thinking, wow, he just told me that he used all the creamer or stole my lunch. I mean, I don't like him for doing that, but good for him. And you respect the person a bit more. Pretty exciting, don't you think?
Sure.
Yes. And do people keep the secrets because they're ashamed? Or is that something different?
No, shame is a big part. So let's talk about dark versus light secrets. Admitting things like never learning to ride a bike, that's a light shame perhaps. But confessing infidelity, usually a pretty big secret. They measured all of these different things. But they found that even for darker secrets that you might have a lot of shame around, that people still overestimated the impact of the thing. But you know what's so interesting? I was in a workplace situation. Can I tell you quickly about my workplace situation? I was 17 years old. I think I was 16, 17, whatever. I was the youngest employee at Saks Fifth Avenue. I worked in the boys department. And One, they needed someone to help with gift wrapping. So, of course, they go to the young dude who's in high school and they're like, will you help with gift wrapping? So I went upstairs and I got in the gift wrapping department. These ladies were amazing and super fun. And we were wrapping gifts and, sending them out the whole time. And I liked it because when you're in retail, you just stand there a lot. But, but here we were doing stuff all the time. So we had some fun. And, one time it was just me and the head lady there, and she's like, oh, she's probably in her 40s looking back. She's like, oh, I'd really love to introduce you to my daughter. She's really lovely, da da da. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I like boys, not girls, or something like that. And she looked horrified and stopped communicating. Never said a word to me for the next 2 weeks. Not one word. And it was so weird. I just like, so you're not going to talk to me or say anything? Or she just ignored me and didn't do anything the whole time. And then, my time ended and I went back down to my department. So this was, I hate to say this was I had the opposite experience of this research. I still believe this research. Just because you have a single incident that's contrary to research you hear doesn't mean it's wrong, that the research is wrong. It just means you're an outlier. And unfortunately, that also was a different time. So there you go.
Definitely a different time.
It definitely was a different time. So why this study is important. One experiment, when challenged, confessed that they told a lie. When they asked people to say, hey, when they assessed that they told a lie, they challenged them to tell the truth. Only 56% of the people told the truth. But when told they probably would not be judged as harshly as they think they will be judged, 92% revealed the lie. So it actually causes people to be much more truthful if you can hold a space to listen to them. And I think therapists operate this way. We don't reject people based on what they tell us, and they tell us sometimes very, very dark secrets. So I often have been told things like, you get told a piece of information, let's say, sometimes things you've not heard of before, and they'll say, that's the first time I've ever told someone that. And in a way, I have to say, I have the same reaction as this study. I think, wow, I feel very privileged that this person is feeling safe enough to be able to tell me that. So,
and it takes a while too, I would say, because it took a while for me to not withhold certain things in therapy as well, where I don't know why I would keep those things, especially if I'm paying for somebody to listen to the things that I want to say. But yeah, I completely agree with that. It's much needed.
Much needed. And so they assess the openness feels good and can help relationships. So can certainly help therapy relationships, can certainly help people relationships. So let's talk about a different study that was also done by University of Texas McCombs School of Business. They were very busy doing their publishing over the holidays. They looked at, this was a different group of researchers too, but from the same school. They looked at the hardest part of waiting. What is the hardest part of waiting for something for you guys?
The entire part for me.
The entire part.
I'm not a good one to wait, and I'll admit that. I'm very impatient.
I used to work at Disneyland, and Disneyland has long lines, and people loved, I thought it was great when they didn't have to wait in line. I mean, you could just walk right on, but often lines would be really long, like 2 hours. So it just depended, on the day and when it was and what was going on, the weather, etc. Anyway, what was so interesting is there was a study that came out a while back that there's kind of a sweet spot for waiting in lines at Disneyland, and it's probably about 20 to 30 minutes. But they found that people who didn't have to wait in lines didn't appreciate things as much. How about that? The waiting actually increased appreciation. Isn't that trippy?
Well, it isn't. I mean, it's exciting to have to wait for something to show up. like if you have an Amazon order and you're excited for it to come, and instead of getting it the next day, you have to wait 4 days, well, then you're just that much more excited about it showing up. So sometimes I'm okay with waiting.
Well, I mean, we certainly know this with things like Christmas when we're kids. We know if we're waiting in lines, in traffic, deliveries, for him or her to pop the question. So sometimes waiting can be something that's very sweet. We all have to wait, but sometimes we don't like it. Sometimes it's very painful. They did this study and they published it in the similar sounding to the previous journal. I just thought this was interesting too. The other journal I looked at was the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. This is one of the top journals. It's an APA or American Psychological Association journal. This other journal is still respectable, but listen to this. It's called the Social Psychological and Personality Science Journal. It's a SAGE journal, which is not I don't want to disparage it. It would be wonderful if I had something published there. So it's definitely good. They also co-authored this with somebody from the University of Chicago. But it's just kind of interesting to me that you have these similar sounding journals and it can be very confusing to the public. So that's what we're here for. So what they found, they did 6 different studies and they looked at subjects. They found that subjects felt the highest level of impatience when as the end of the waiting period approached. We know this from behavior therapy. So as you get closer to a goal, you usually increase your performance to complete the goal. But waiting, when you're not really doing much, actually your impatience gets much more as you get closer to the goal. Isn't that interesting? So regardless of how long you've been waiting, I call this the microwave effect. Do you ever stand in front of a microwave and you're like, it's minute 30 and you're standing there going, oh, I'll just pull it out. Oh, wait. Okay. A minute 10. Okay. I'll just take it out. What is that? Why can't I wait 20 more seconds?
I couldn't tell you. Do I stand in front of the microwave? No.
I keep myself busy while the
you guys
timer's
are being
going. I'm like, I'm going to do something.
Contrary. Okay, so the primary reason for waiting is people's desire. For impatience is people's desire for closure when they're waiting for something. So when they wish to end it, they get more impatient as it comes. So advice to companies, chefs, waiters, home cooks, etc. If you're going to be late, communicate possible delays as early as possible. That'll prepare people. Here's a good one. Overestimate the waiting period rather than underestimate it. I hope all airlines take note of that, as they're all telling us 10 more minutes, and 2 hours later, you're still sitting there. And a less harmful experience of waiting can lead to a positive evaluation of the service. So if people if you overestimate the wait and then you hit them up early, you communicate it early, and then you give it to them, they're going to evaluate the service much better. So that's just something fun to note.
Voila.
Okay. Now, same-sex couples. What? Same-sex couples. Wow, that sounded bad. Same-sex couples are doing it better. What are they doing it better in? Well, there was an analysis. This is a different thing. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this. This is an analysis of in-depth interviews with 10 same-sex couples. This was done in Australia and New Zealand. And this was published in LGBTQ plus Family. It's an interdisciplinary journal looking at LGBTQ plus research. This was something called qualitative research versus quantitative research. So the other studies I was looking at were quantitative. And in psychology, most of the things we do to publish are quantitative. That means you use numbers, basically. So both of them are there for knowledge acquisition. That's why we're talking about studies. We're talking about new knowledge or cool stuff or stuff that other people are proving exists. We're not just making it up out of whole cloth. And then quantitative, which I'm more familiar with and I've done a lot of, is numeric and objective. You're seeking to answer questions like when and where. You often will do things qualitatively, or you will be concerned with subjective phenomenon that can't be numerically measured. and like how different people experience grief. But qualitative research often leads to later quantitative research, because what you're doing is going, well, how do people experience grief? Wow, we're finding out all these stages they experience grief. So let's do that, and then let's devise a study that we can assess this. So it's often used in conjunction. They're used in conjunction with each other. But this was just a cool study that they published that really looked at same-sex couples in Australia. And why this was interesting to me too is this went against some earlier research remember when same-sex couples got the right to marry, when the Supreme Court said it was okay to marry back when, that there was some research out that showed that same-sex couples divided household chores in a particular way. And it seemed that this research, which is older and more dated, but the person who was more identified in the more feminine role within the male-male relationship often would take the more housework duties. I thought this was and we saw this in female-female relationships too. This research might not have been very good, or who knows. So, I mean, and now we're looking at more up-to-date research, and this is just done on interviews. So, this is probably a developing field, but this is more consistent with how I experience things and have talked to people in the past. But in heterosexual couples, do women do the bulk of the housework and the caregiving? Is that true in your household, Zoe?
It is.
All right. Yeah. So the problem here, what's the problem? Is there a problem?
Not at all.
Okay. I hear that seemed a little Stepford-esque, but it's the uneven division of labor can lead to burnout, health problems, and financial stress.
Yes, but I'm very good at asking for what I need and want and my preferences.
That is consistent with my experience of you. You are good at assertiveness, so very good. Yeah. So let's talk about this.
And I wouldn't be happy if I couldn't speak up. So, if the laundry basket is overflowing, I say, I shouldn't have to lift that heavy thing into the laundry room. That's kind of like a guy job. Go for it. And he gets the message.
Well, we're looking at same-sex couples, and they did not split housework 50-50. But the key, they focused on achieving a sense of fairness and equality over time. So maybe that's what you're doing as well. So how did they do this? They keep changing things up. Number one, this is what they found in their research. They keep changing things up. They negotiate roles based on individual availability and what they like doing or least despise. Good example, perhaps, I don't mind. I don't despise taking out the trash, and I don't mind doing laundry especially because it has a beginning, middle, end, and there's kind of a rhythm to it. But there are things I do mind, oddly enough, like yard work. How about that? And so why are you laughing, Brian?
I'm just laughing.
Okay.
I think it's funny.
See, I don't like taking out the trash. I don't like doing that.
I don't like the dishes. I hate the dishes.
Well, I have a dishwasher.
I don't trust a dishwasher.
I trust it. I embrace it. It was a priority. I had one installed. So it brings a sense of fairness and satisfaction to keep changing things up. They found that there were three basic things. The first is that same-sex couples embraced flexibility. If one partner takes the kids swimming but has a lot of work, the other partner steps in. They play the long game with relationships. They balance unpaid labor with each other's career progression. And they engage in something called, or they don't engage in something called task specialization, which is you have one person doing the same thing over and over. So, and this is true in my relationship too. I will say there are things I like to do, but I will pick up the slack when needed, because task specialization can lead to dependence and rigidity. So couples shared tasks to avoid doing this.
That's awesome.
The second was communication. Couples who engage in honest conversations about their labor responsibilities tend to view household divisions as more fair. Couples who engage in negative communication, like aggression, avoidance, and criticism, kind of what you're expecting to do there at your gym there, Brian, see division as more unfair. And the same-sex couples in this study tend to navigate disagreements through candid conversations. That means they did things like regular check-ins to see how the other person is doing and feeling, and renegotiating as things change. And they also remembered the number 3 thing, remembered unpaid labor is valuable. Undervaluing housework diminishes the quality of relationships. And what's the number 1 thing people want in a relationship? What is it, you guys?
Quality.
It's number 1 thing most people want in a relationship is appreciation. Appreciation. So always give appreciation. Same-sex couples in this study sought to revalue unpaid labor by assigning it with equal worth to paid labor. They view household labor as acts of love.
Aww.
I thought that was wonderful.
I do thank my husband for taking the trash out. Like when he does it, I thank him. I'm like, thank you for getting the trash out. Like that's appreciation, right?
Good. And does he appreciate you for when you do household tasks as well?
He thanks me for dinner and thanks me for making things so nice. And,
So they suggested some activities with physical chore. List your physical chores out, like shopping or cleaning, your emotional tasks like caring for children or pets, and your mental tasks like planning meals or managing finances. Then estimate the time spent with each. Then have a heart-to-heart discussion about each. Then see how you can make things fairer.
I'll tell you, I think that appreciation thing, we should underline that. I think that is such a big deal. Like, thank you for taking care of the finances. Thank you for handling the estate and the IRA, whatever, that stuff that based on whether or not you enjoy doing it or don't enjoy doing it. I mean, I thank him for the yard work. Like, I think that's so important to let your partner know that you appreciate the things that they do.
So important. So remember, flexibility, communication, and valuing labor equally. Yeah. There we go. Nice. So I wanted to talk mostly about this today. There was a study, not a study, it was a story in the New York Times. And this also appeared in their podcast called The Daily. And this was, New York Times story was in the Upstart. Oh, shoot. I forgot to write down the authors, Emily and Ben. This is all I wrote. But Emily, I have the link. If you go to my YouTube page, you can link to the story. It's really worth it. The story is called Why Are So Many Pedestrians Being Killed? Oh. And this was very important to me because I'm a pedestrian nearly every day. I don't just I drive to work, but that's about where I drive. I drove here today, but I do try to walk every day to the gym, to the grocery store. I also go to restaurants. I live in a very walkable neighborhood. That was important to me when I got my house, and that was just important to my lifestyle. But there were some things to look at. The New York Times uncovered that 3,000 more pedestrians have died in the United States in 2021 versus 2009. They found that pedestrian deaths in the United States are rising versus other countries. And they found that 85% of the rise in the deaths in the United States are attributable to deaths in the darkness. Now, we could say, it happens at night. But night's been happening for a long time, last I checked. And other countries have darkness too. So there's something particular to the United States that's causing this problem.
People are always flying down the road. They're always rushing. Like they're always speeding. And they're always texting.
Well, we're going to talk about those things.
Yeah.
So, I like I love journalists because journalists are scientists, or the real journalists, not opinion journalists. I mean, they're good. Opinion journalists are fun to read, but like the New York Times, LA Times, and other, newspapers that have sourced journalism, they go to many, many sources and they pull information together. This study was done by these two researchers, and it was done over months. This was done almost it was done exactly like a qualitative study, but they really actually went for some quantitative things as well. And they asked three questions. Why did this increase start in 2009? Because we were falling before that. Actually, pedestrian deaths were falling before 2009. What is something that's particular to the United States? Because other countries had 2009 and 2010. They went through the same progression that we did. What is something particular to us? And why is it worse at night versus daytime?
Well, I mean,
well, let me go into it. Yeah, you'd say, yeah.
I get it. Again, people rushing home, trying to get home, all of that, not paying attention. Their focus is pulled. But other countries have much more pedestrian, bicycle kind of. They're more those kinds of more forward places in that regard. We are almost solely an automobile society.
So let's talk about that. So why 2009? Number one, it's the rise of smartphones and technology in cars. Apple introduced its iPhone in 2007.
Yep.
So if you just account for the rapid adoption, people started to transition to smartphones, and smartphones existed before that. I certainly, we had things like the, what was that called? BlackBerry. And we had the other one. I used the other one. Yeah, all those ones that you would tap on and do all that stuff. So they did exist, but the iPhone revolutionized smartphones. That's when it really rose. That's also when technology in cars rose. Previously, it was dials and buttons. And if you guys remember dials and buttons, you could memorize where everything was. You didn't have to look down. You're like, okay, I'm cold. I'll turn up the heat. Oh, the radio station, change. Everything, you could keep your eye on the road and do everything by feel. Now things are all on a screen. And I have a car, Tesla, and you have to do everything on a screen. And even today, I was sitting there futzing through screens going, this is so frustrating, because it mean like a good 15 seconds to find something, which is a lot of time on the road. I mean, it's a lot of time.
I learned on the road, yeah.
The Tesla Model S was introduced in 2012, and the Model X was introduced in 2015. And of course, those don't account for all the pedestrian deaths, but they certainly, start to introduce the real distracted driving. The Model 3, which was really Tesla's blockbuster car, was introduced in 2017. Everything on the screen. So they then looked at why the United States. So that's why 2009, it was really the advent of of technology. But other countries had smartphones. Other countries had technology. So why the United States? Well, in the United States, this seemed very interesting to me. 99% of vehicles sold in 2023 were automatic transmission. Only 1% sold were manual transmission. 1%. In Europe, 70 to 75% of cars sold have manual transmissions. They have a stick shift. Do you guys know how to drive a stick shift?
I do not.
You don't.
No.
Okay, you don't, but you do, Zoe. Yes, I do too. My first 3 cars were stick shift, and I loved it. I drove that thing till I was probably, a good.
Yeah. So in other words, you need both of your hands to drive when you have a manual transmission.
Both of your hands and both of your feet.
And your phone and
and both of your feet. With stick shift, all four are engaged. You
Everything's
got the
going.
whole thing going on. So in Europe, only 25 to 30% are automatic transmissions. Now, what we're seeing is an increase in automatic transmissions in Europe. And even when I was in Norway, it's just you saw electric cars everywhere. And I don't know of a manual transmission electric car. I think all of them are automatic. So, we're seeing an increase start to happen there. But why nighttime? Well, there is something particular. Distracted driving in the United States is particular to the nighttime. It's more common at night. The reason is there's coordination with partners to pick up kids. So people are on their phone, making dinner dates, meeting with friends. And also unique to the United States is an after-work culture of taking work calls and texts, where other countries don't do this as much. They really do try to respect, work is work and home is home. So what we see then is we're more distracted. We're more involved in technology. We're driving automatic cars, which changes the configuration of our cars. So now we can hold a phone. And even though phones seem to have Bluetooth, I can't tell you the amount of cars I see, people holding a phone up to their face, to the point I saw a woman in a brand new SUV. You can't tell me that brand new giant SUV didn't have up-to-date technology. It was quite an expensive one. She was pulling up to a stop. We had a green arrow, like the little green man, telling us to walk. There was a guy in front of me about 15 feet. He was dressed in all beige and, of course, had an all beige dog. They were completely matching. And I was remarking on this in my head. Why do people match their dogs? So I'm walking behind him having that thought. And this woman comes barreling up. And it's clear to me that she doesn't see that it's a red light. We're crossing the street. She doesn't see it's a red light or that there are people in front of her. She's holding her phone right up to her face with her hand on the steering wheel. All of a sudden, I think either her car stopped her because she probably had one of those pedestrian avoidance things, because she looks shocked like this, stopped within an inch of this guy. He's like, oh my God, he was totally in shock. And she put down her phone, and I'm like, I couldn't even believe this. She almost killed this guy because she was holding a phone up to her face. And she might have claimed that she wasn't on the phone, but she had a witness. I saw her do it, which I gave a dirty look.
They're all very fortunate.
Yeah, all very fortunate. Oh, well, I was actually I wouldn't have been hit by her. I would literally watch this happen within 10 feet, 15 feet of me. So I just thought it was one of those really scary things. And I thought, wow, we're doing this story today, just in a few hours. And here I'm observing this exact thing. Yeah. So, we need to think about these things. Also uniquely American, that was her too. She was driving a big SUV. We have higher hoods, wider bodies, bigger cars, and they're just heavier in general. So these cars are like battering rams going down the road. They have longer stopping distances. So when you do depress your brake, you can't stop it as quickly as you can a smaller car. Because the higher hood, you're actually going to do a lot more damage to the person there, because you're actually hitting the person not at their legs, which can still do a great deal of damage, but you're hitting them at their chest level. And she would have definitely hit this guy about his mid-clavicle. That's about where her hood stopped. And so it hits higher on bodies, it does more damage, and thus it can kill people a bit more. This is very uniquely American. And yes, Americans also are moving to Sunbelt parts of the country, Texas, Florida, Arizona, and those places are built primarily for cars, not for pedestrians. So we've got this multifactorial problem. And we've got in California, there's a great YouTube channel that I've been watching called Not Just Bikes. And I do recommend it. And I'm putting a link in my YouTube, Not Just Bikes, which even has a feature on pedestrians and the danger that they're out there. But California has these special types of roads that you don't see in Europe as much. They call them stroads, which are these combination street roads. So it's like a neighborhood street because it has shops on it, has businesses on it, but it's like a road because it has high speed access. And that's basically Los Angeles. It's basically Phoenix. It's basically Houston, where I lived. And in Houston is especially bad because they don't even have sidewalks half the time. They're building them. I think Houston's trying to come up to speed a little bit, but they have the worst infrastructure. I mean, it is definitely 20 years behind. So there are some, there's just a lot of factors waiting. And what you said earlier, Zoe, is exactly right. We have unseparated bike lanes where Europe is really trying to separate bike lanes. They're trying to use more public transit. Just a lot of things are built. And we look at Los Angeles, we could go into the history of Los Angeles. We had a streetcar system that was very extensive and was bought up by Firestone Tires, General Motors, and Standard Oil. I think they did a triple conglomerate. They bought up the streetcar system, dismantled it so they could increase the access to car usage in Los Angeles.
We are an automobile culture.
We are an automobile culture, and we are not friendly to pedestrians. So when people can't afford a car, they're really screwed. So we're especially hard to our working class.
The bottom line is if you're walking and your head is in your phone, things are going to happen to you. If you're driving and your head is in the phone, you're going to hurt someone and yourself. So the etiquette of the whole thing is, I mean, I can't tell you how I'm constantly dodging people. Because
I want to get to the etiquette in a second. Give me 1 sec, Zoe. I'm going to get to the etiquette in 1 sec. If you could.
Okay.
Yeah. Because this is uniquely American. Florida is especially dangerous. There's a 70% increase in Florida. What do we see there? It's an aging population and a high working class that can't afford cars. So we see a much bigger problem there. We also see in LA, homelessness started rising in 2016. That's when we started to see our problem. We saw people living near or alongside major roads. We saw a 30% rise in homelessness, along with working poor, unable to afford a car. And all these phenomena happen disproportionately in low-income neighborhoods. So we really do need to think about this and why we're thinking about this. But a lot of drivers in the LA Times feature, they had a problem with pedestrians. They blame pedestrians. They said pedestrians don't look both ways before crossing. They look at phones when they walk. They're distracted walking. I've done this, so I'm aware. They don't wear light-colored or reflective clothing at night. And I'm like, wow, I don't do that. I often, I do try to be very mindful. But when we blame the pedestrian, we're blaming the victim. And I won't go into blaming the victim. We'll do that another day. But that is really a cheap shot because people in cars are driving battering rams. It is the responsibility of the driver. That is certainly the law in California. I don't know about Arizona or New Mexico.
Of course it is. Pedestrians have the right of way, period. It doesn't matter what kind of car you're driving.
But I do think sometimes pedestrians are bad. I have a friend who just charges out into traffic because he said they should stop. And I'm like, you are absolutely crazy. I will not do that. I always cross at crosswalks, etc., because I'm so fearful because I do walk so much and I see how poorly people drive and how aggressively. When I'm walking across in a crosswalk, I'll have people that will speed up at me. And it's kind of scary. So, I know people are very angry and, blame the pandemic, et cetera, but we have a problem here. And we could do this. We could take the phone away. We could wear protective clothing. We could do public information campaigns. We can do all this. But when we really look at other countries, it comes down to environment. And this is what I want to talk about. So inside the car, the environment's different. They have stick shift cars that's going to keep them not engaged in their phone. They have a culture change, but we can't change our culture. Our culture is going to be, we're going to do work 24 hours a day. That's an American thing to do. In every other country, they're going to be more respectful of that. But we can do things like not pick up our phone when we're in the car. And I used to always advise clients, put the phone in the trunk. Well, people will often say, oh, no, I can't. What if I get a call? But, there's Bluetooth, but nonetheless. They advise changing the city streets, changing the cars, putting the phone down. But the city streets are very interesting. When you look at how Europe designed city streets, you can see, and there's a guy in this Not Just Bikes channel who actually talks about its signs are not as strong as physics. And that when you change the road, like you narrow the road, you put things, put traffic calming devices, you put a little bit of a hump so you make it more friendly for pedestrians to walk over, and that'll act as a speed bump that will slow traffic down. It's very interesting that all of these things can be done more physically. And what I wanted to talk about was environmental psychology, which is how our external world can actually change our behavior. Here, external world is changing our behavior to get killed more easily and to kill other people. I hate to be the driver that ran into somebody. That would be devastating. You'd never recover from that. But to change the external world to change behavior from within. Too many people think psychology is just intrapsychic in the head. Psychology really is not just about the head, it's about behavior. And behavior can be changed not just from the head, but it can be changed from the external world. And we're going to be talking a lot more about environmental psychology as times come. Brian, I know, has an interest in that. So we're going to talk about it quite a bit more. But we can change the road. We can increase consequence for speeding, maybe running red lights, and not yielding to pedestrians. We can prevent cell phone usage in the car. I don't know why we don't do that, but
we do.
Well, we might make a rule for it, but people still, they drive like with the phone in front of them. The phone, but you could disable the phone. You can disable
there are
the phone.
laws about.
No, I meant you could physically disable the phone. No. The law doesn't do it, though. You can physically disable the phone. And I think that is a behavior change that would actually be able to help people to override that behavior. So now let's talk about, since we can't do any of those things, now let's talk about what is the etiquette for driving and walking, Zoe?
You shouldn't be on your phone when you're driving. That's a law, and in most states, and that will help you not only not ruin your life, but hurt or ruin someone else's life. And so the same goes when you're walking down the street, or you're in the mall, or you're in the grocery store, and your people are trying to dodge you because you're on your phone, not paying attention to those around you. I'm sure people have been hurt just doing that too. So it's best if we all just say, okay, well, I can be off my phone for 20 minutes while I'm in the grocery store. That's not too much to ask.
Well, if I can ask, as a pedestrian, as a driver, it's changed me as a driver. I always stop at stop signs. I always stop at a red light when I'm making a red. I don't coast through the red light. Why? Because I know when you're at a red light making a right on a red, you look to the left and a pedestrian is walking out to the right.
Correct.
So I always stop so I can make sure to look. I always stop at a stop sign. I'm sure it's annoying to the people behind me. But
it's the law.
But it doesn't matter. At least here in California, California stop is a thing where people, if they slow down 5 miles an hour from the 50 miles an hour that they're cruising down the neighborhood street, they're doing you a service. So there's just a thing here, at least here in the deep heart of LA, you see a lot more of this going on. Making eye contact with drivers. I always try to make eye contact with drivers, but dudes, people get their side windows tinted. What's that about? That's illegal, but they still do it. And that's very important. Make eye contact, then they see you, you can walk on.
I would also say,
you were talking about at night. If your windows are tinted, sometimes I have to have to hit the window down so I can make sure that nobody's coming across.
Right.
Because it's so dark sometimes to see them. And like you said, if I hurt someone with my car, I'm never getting over that. Like never.
Also, don't assume. I recently realized, don't assume what the other driver is doing. Because there was a driver coming and she had her signal to turn right, and I was coming out of a parking lot. And I assumed she was getting into the street that was coming up, but she was going past it and going into the same parking lot that I was going to go into. So she was going to pretty much hit me at that time just because I had assumed she was turning in that intersection prior. So I'm like, that was a quick little lesson that I'm like, nope. All right, I'm just going to completely wait until everything's clear.
And
Cars are weapons. That's why.
And, if you're in an Uber or one of those things, get out on the curb side of the street. This is just smart, rather than the street side of the street, or picking up a valet. I mean, my God, people often double park cars out there in the middle of a busy street, and it can be really difficult. Make eye contact, use sidewalks, use the right-hand side of sidewalks if you're a pedestrian. Do watch for oncoming traffic, especially buses, because they have super long stopping distances. The buses in LA,
they're scary.
They will run red lights. They're not taking prisoners. They are just mowing you down. So, anyway, it is a dog eat dog world, I suppose. But I think we do need to be respectful of each other and have each other's back. And that'll make a more pleasant world for everybody. And nobody wants to really hurt someone. I don't think anyone who's driving recklessly really wants to hurt someone. They're just angry, or they're, they want to prove something, or they're, I don't know, impatient. Oh, also, if you can try this experiment, everyone, try getting in the slowest lane when you're commuting from home to work, and then take the slowest lane home, and see if your commute is all that different. I do this experiment. I've done it for years with people who have difficulty with traffic, who get very impatient, who are very, who talk to me about how they do weaving in and out, or they get speeding tickets, et cetera, et cetera. I do this experiment, and there, without fail, every single person will tell me, "Oh yeah, I saved a minute going fast, and then when I just went in the slowest lane, it only was an extra minute or two." And that to me is incredible. It's just incredible. So, remember the patience study we did earlier? People get very impatient as they get close to the goal. So we all can just allow a little bit more time. Remember, overestimate the amount of time you need, and you're going to be a lot more comfortable. And then when you get there, you'll be surprised. Look, I got there in such good time. So there you go, folks. Okay, so I think that wraps up the show for today. We had to go through a lot. Sorry I had to rush through that. Thank you, Zoe and Brian, and this is Dr. Greg. We're all bidding you farewell until next time. Be present, be flexible, and be kind.